Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, President Park Geun-hye marks the beginning of her third year in office. We take a look back at the last 12 months and ahead to the challenges that remain. Grim reports emerge about the danger posed by North Korea. US experts say the regime poses a real and serious threat to South Korea and the United States and could potentially have a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons by the year 2020. Plus, eurozone finance ministers approve reform proposals submitted by Greece, granting Athens a 4-month extension of its bailout. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, February 25th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, a US-based think tank says North Korea's nuclear and missile programs pose a serious threat, not only to the Korean Peninsula, but also to the United States. The Heritage Foundation says the North likely possesses the ability to place nuclear weapons on its medium-range missiles, as well as the technology to miniaturize warheads. Saying that North Korea has an extensive ballistic missile force, the think tank added the country has deployed around 800 Scud short-range missiles, 300 Nodong medium-range missiles and 50 Musudan intermediate-range ballistic missiles. It goes on to say that Pyongyang continues to develop ICBMs, some capable of hitting the US. It also noted that North Korea has deployed 70% of its ground forces within 140 kilometers of the demilitarized zone, making it possible to attack South Korea with little or no warning. Staying on the topic of North Korea, and a US expert says North Korea could potentially expand its nuclear stockpile to 100 weapons over the next 5 years. Joel Witt, a senior fellow at the US Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University, says Pyongyang is currently believed to possess between 10 to 16 nuclear weapons. He gives 3 possible scenarios for the North's nuclear expansion, with Pyongyang forecast to double its stockpile at minimal growth, 50 at moderate growth, and in the worst case, 100. Witt notes that the North could still expand its nuclear stockpile, even if it does not conduct nuclear tests. He called on the South Korean government to give up its unrealistic fantasy of unification and focus on reality, stressing that North Korea is a country that will soon have between 50 to 100 nuclear weapons. South Korea's annual joint military drills with the United States will start next Monday and run for 8 weeks. North Korea is striking its usual defiant tone and raising the rhetoric as it believes the drills are a war exercise targeting the regime. Seoul and Washington maintain the drills are purely defensive. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Tensions are brewing on the Korean Peninsula ahead of an annual South Korea-U.S. military exercise set to begin next week. More than 200,000 troops are participating in a 2-week-long computerized command post exercise called Key Resolve and a field training drill named Foul Eagle that runs through April. What's different in this year's drill is the participation of the U.S. Coastal Combat Ship Fort Worth, designed to navigate shallow waters and carry helicopters and unmanned aerial vehicles. Seoul and Washington maintain that these drills are defensive and non-provocative in nature, but to North Korea, they are seen as a rehearsal for war. North Korea's Nodong Sinmun newspaper said that with the drills, the chance for dialogue or a diplomatic solution has already been lost, and what's left is to respond militarily while strengthening deterrence to the maximum. While this tug-of-war is an annual occurrence, warnings from Pyongyang are not taken lightly, as it's acted upon various threats over the past 2 years. In 2013, North Korea banned entry to South Koreans at the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex due to Seoul and Washington's joint military exercises. And last March, it fired some 500 rockets into the West Sea for the same reason. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Now, a new poll has shown that the majority of Japanese citizens think Prime Minister Shinzo Abe should show remorse for the country's wrongdoings during the Second World War. Abe is set to release a statement on his government's stance in August on the 70th anniversary of Tokyo's surrender. Our Hwang Sang-hee has the details.
The majority of the Japanese public says Prime Minister Shinzo Abe should uphold the apology for Japan's wartime atrocities expressed by his predecessors. A poll conducted by the Sankei Shimbun and Fuji News Network showed more than half of the respondents think a forthcoming statement by Abe should retain words like aggression, remorse, and apology used in the Murayama statement. Abe is set to release a statement this summer to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. The Japanese leader has hinted at moving away from the landmark apology issued in 1995 by then Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama, saying he wants the statement to reflect his government's position. But polls conducted by other Japanese media outlets, including the Asahi Shimbun, NHK, and Yomiuri Shimbun, have all produced similar results, that the Abe statement should carry words of remorse and apology over Japan's wartime role. So will the public sentiment be enough to sway the Japanese leader?
Then we're going to see a struggle between Shinzo Abe, the politician, who does what the majority want him to do, versus Shinzo Abe, the principled, committed defender of a proud Japan that has no more apologies for its past.
If Abe retains the expressions of remorse, experts say Korea could take it as a signal of his sincerity and an occasion to move forward in its current frosty relations with Japan. The bigger question is whether the Korean public will be ready to accept Abe's gestures. Experts say the government in Seoul will have to tread carefully to see if they have public support and move slowly on the issue. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
A Korean teenager who vanished in Turkey last month has joined the Islamic State militant group and has been receiving training from them. During a parliamentary committee meeting on Tuesday, lawmakers quoted an official at the National Intelligence Service as saying the 18-year-old, identified by his family name Kim, was staying at an IS training camp in Syria. Now, Kim had posted tweets in English and Arabic last October inquiring how he could join the extremist group. He was last seen on January 10th, leaving a hotel on the Turkey-Syria border. TVs made by Korean tech giants Samsung and LG are maintaining their lead in the North American and European markets. But when it comes to smartphones, it's quite a different story. With the latest performance figures from Korea's biggest tech brands, Song Ji-sun reports.
Korea's high-tech TVs are solidifying their lead in the global flat-screen TV market. In Europe, the combined flat TV market share of Samsung and LG Electronics in 2014 topped 60%, meaning 3 out of 5 European customers bought Korean-made flat-screen TVs last year. While LG was at 3rd place in the US market last year, behind local producer Vizio, the two Korean tech giants' combined market share still amounted to nearly half. The trend is backed by the strong preferences of US customers. This year's Consumer Loyalty Engagement Index compiled by the US-based Brand Keys shows Samsung is the top TV producer with the highest brand loyalty for the 4th consecutive year. The firm surveyed over 36,000 American consumers on how willing they are to purchase products from the same brand. The Korean tech giants may be doing well in the flat TV market, but they're struggling to regain their grip on the smartphone segment. In the same poll, Apple kept its lead in the smartphone and laptop categories for the 2nd year in a row, a title once claimed by Samsung back in 2013. Strategy analysts' 4th quarter figures show that Apple accounted for some 49% of global smartphone sales, with its large-screen iPhone 6 models dominating the premium smartphone sector, while Samsung slumped to just 17%. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, life is tough for young Koreans looking to land the job of their dreams these days. A university degree only is often not enough to get you noticed by the big companies, so many people are looking to add extra academic strings to their bow. However, it is a double-edged sword because if you wait too long, you could be considered too old, and that's even if you've just celebrated your 30th birthday. Kwon So-ah reports.
It's graduation season in Korea. As a country where around 2/3 of people have a university degree, it's no wonder that it's tough for these fresh-faced graduates to land their dream job.
It has become more difficult to find a job in your field of interest.
It's hard. I'm interested in opening a startup, but I'm afraid as it isn't easy. But then again, it's also hard to apply for a job.
Despite the rosy outlook on the gradual rise in the number of people in work, it's a different story for young people looking to get their foot in the door at a good company.
Due to a limited number of quality jobs, people work part-time jobs until they find a high-quality workplace, or they just continue to search for jobs.
That's why the age of people who were never in the workforce before keeps rising. 1/3 of applicants at some 380 companies last year were in their 30s. Persistently striving for your goal is not a bad thing. That is, if age wasn't a consideration when it comes to getting hired. A job-searching portal says almost 60% of those responsible for hiring are reluctant to take on new people they consider old, men over 32 and women over 30. According to the study, more than half of Korean employees feel uncomfortable working with new people in those age groups, mainly because of Korea's hierarchical office system, which usually demands that junior employees strictly obey their seniors. But as Korean society also strictly values respect for the elderly, many senior employees say it's awkward to give orders to their older juniors. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
More and more global companies are packing up and pulling their factories out of China, raising concerns the country's manufacturing industry could be spiralling down a dangerous path as labour costs rise and economic growth contracts. Analysts say China has lost its position as the go-to place to invest. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Japanese watchmaker Citizen recently shut down its factory in Guangzhou. More than 1,000 employees are up in arms due to the sudden layoff, but the company says it's part of its restructuring plans. Citizen isn't the only one. U.S. software giant Microsoft has also shut down its Nokia factory in Guangzhou and plans to open a new factory in Vietnam. And with its Beijing factory also slated to close, some 9,000 employees are expected to lose their jobs. Industry watchers estimate that before the Chinese New Year, more than 100 large factories, including ones run by Sharp and Panasonic, were shuttered in the city of Dongguan, one of the country's main manufacturing hubs. So what has triggered the mass exodus?
Many manufacturing companies entered China 2 decades ago because of cheap land and labor costs, but that's not the case now. Also, the Chinese market did not expand as fast as companies had expected.
What's more is that countries in Southeast Asia, such as India and Vietnam, are stepping up efforts to lure foreign companies. The US, Japan, and Europe are also offering incentives, such as tax cuts and investment support, to encourage homegrown companies to come back. The trend has raised concerns that China's manufacturing industry, once driven by cheap labor, may be heading for a crisis. The official Purchasing Managers Index stood at 49.8 in January, falling below 50 for the first time in more than 2 years, signaling a contraction. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
2 years ago today, President Park Geun-hye was inaugurated into office. Her second year as president was certainly a turbulent one. From a ferry disaster, personnel failures and a document leak scandal to a tax policy controversy. President Park herself Having said this year will be a golden time for her economic and reform initiatives to bear fruit, we'll need parliamentary cooperation and public support more than ever before. Our Chae-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye began her second year in office, vowing to breathe new life into the domestic economy and improve inter-Korean ties to prepare for unification. But everything came to a standstill when the Seoul ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast on April 16th, claiming the lives of more than 300 people. The government's lax response came under fire, and President Park vowed to strengthen disaster management and revamp her administration. But her personnel selection and insufficient communication were criticized, with two of her prime minister nominees being forced to withdraw amid controversies. A document leaked from the presidential office late last year and a controversial tax policy revision caused the president's approval rating to drop to an all-time low of 29%. Responding to public criticism, President Park has carried out a reshuffle and is expected to name her new chief of staff.
The question is whether the new chief of staff can mediate between the president, the political parties, and the people, while at the same time helping the president.
No expert seems to question the president's commitment to the country or her determination to improve the quality of living in Korea. They say for the Park administration to make progress, she needs to change her leadership style, give more authority to her cabinet, improve communication with the political parties and the public to promote the objectives of her reform policies, such as health insurance and public pension.
What's more important is for Parliament to lead discussions with the government and civic groups and set the framework for an outcome on the issues. If the presidential office takes the driver's seat, it will face a great backlash.
Political observers are unanimous in saying that now is the golden time for the president to better communicate to produce the desired results in an economic and reform drive. Chae-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Wednesday morning from Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Greece is one big step closer to securing a 4-month extension to its bailout program, as eurozone finance ministers have approved Athens' reform plan. Now the deal needs to be ratified by national parliaments in the coming days. Members of the Eurogroup approved the submitted reform plan in a telephone conference, but later called on Athens to further develop the current arrangement in close coordination with relevant institutions. Athens will soon begin discussions with its EU and IMF partners on meeting this year's financing shortfall. The European Commission and the ECB both said the Greek proposals were a valid starting point. The Eurozone's most indebted nation is dealing with a debt of more than $360 billion, and its bailout was to expire on Saturday. The detailed reform proposal is set to include measures to curb tax evasion, tackle corruption, and help Greeks stuck in a so-called humanitarian crisis deepened by years of austerity. The 3 London schoolgirls who flew to Turkey last week are believed to have crossed into Islamic State territory. The UK's Metropolitan Police said it now had reason to believe the trio were no longer in Turkey and have crossed into Syria, without offering further details. The 2 15-year-olds and 1 16-year-old had flown to Istanbul on February 17th, one of them after telling her parents she was going to a wedding. Family members have made public pleas to the girls to make contact with them after learning they were on their way to join the Islamic State group. The BBC reports the girls were smuggled into Syria 4 or 5 days ago near the Kilis border crossing. They are believed to have been in contact with the extremist group via social media sites before leaving their homes in London. Meanwhile, Islamic State militants have kidnapped at least 90 Assyrian Christians in northeastern Syria in the latest known act of violence by the extremist group, many of them women and children. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported on Tuesday that they were captured near the town of Talmir following house-to-house raids before dawn. Thousands of others fled from the assault. The abductions came after the U.S.-led coalition launched 11 airstrikes over the last 2 days against IS targets across Syria and Iraq. New U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter, who is in the Middle East to meet with military commanders and diplomats, said a lasting defeat against IS will require a combined diplomatic and military effort. And finally, a plume of black smoke rose to the skies in Ventura County, northwest of Los Angeles, after a commuter train collided with a tractor-trailer truck early Monday morning local time. Oxnard police said at least 28 people were hurt, 4 of them critically, after 3 carriages derailed. They said the train was traveling significantly slower at the time of impact at 127 kilometers per hour.
A good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games. Now, one of the biggest issues with the preparations of the Games is the lack of corporate sponsorship. And now the president has stepped up, requesting for more firms to sponsor the event. Now, on Tuesday, President Park Geun-hye talked about the current status of the Pyeongchang Winter Games and stated its urgency for more corporate sponsors in order for the event to be successful. Now, she added that the Winter Olympics is a great opportunity for companies to increase their brand value and encouraged more firms to sponsor the event. Now, so far, only 4 Korean companies have pledged to sponsor the Games, totaling a mere $229 million. Now, Coca-Cola might be known as a major soft drink company, but they also host the annual CocaCola Sports Awards, which honors the top amateur athletes here in the nation. And on Tuesday, the top award went to none other than Son Yeon-jae. Now, the event, which has been running since 1995, named rhythmic gymnast Son Yeon-jae as the top amateur athlete for 2014, citing her incredible gold medal finish at the Incheon Asian Games, a first for a Korean rhythmic gymnast. Now, she beat out Greco-Roman wrestler Lee Hyun-woo and Lee Na-young, who claimed 4 gold medals in bowling during last year's Asian Games. Now, some things just never get old, like bacon and the National Winter Sports Festival, which is kicking off later today for the 96th time here in Korea. Now, with the opening ceremony taking place at 10 a.m. at the Yongpyeong Resorts in Gangwon-do Province, 2,632 athletes from all across the nation will come together to compete in various winter sports. Of course, highlighting the event will be figure skating as Park So-yeon and Kim Hae-jin continue their rivalry, while short track and speed skating will garner a lot of interest, despite Lee Sang-hwa pulling out of the event after ending her season early. Now, come June, the 2015 Women's World Cup will take place in Canada, where the Korean women's national football team hopes to grab the trophy for the first time. And if you're here in the nation and want a chance at seeing the trophy yourself, you can, but just like Katy Perry once sang, you can look, but you can't touch. Now, starting today, the Women's World Cup trophy will be showcased at the Paju National Training Center for the national team members, and again on Thursday for the public at the Lotte World Mall in Songpagu District. Meanwhile, the national team will begin training today as well as they continue to prepare for the big event in June. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Upper provinces, including here in Seoul, has moderately high level of fine dust at this hour, but it should return to the normal range in a couple of hours. Then we'll have partly sunny morning, but things will get much cloudier as the day moves along, and it will be a rainy day for some parts. It will rain from Jeju this afternoon, and then later on, upper provinces, including here in Seoul, will also see light rain falling after 9 9 p.m. tonight. So till then, we'll have dry and mild day today. The current reading has already gone up to above the freezing mark here in Seoul. Then the high will later peak at 9 this afternoon, feeling more like early spring. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. So the daytime high here in Seoul will climb up to 9, and the top temperatures in Daegu and Busan will rise to 11, and Gwangju will peak at 10 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should both peak at 10, while Dokdo rises to 7. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's going to do it for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour. Have a great day. Goodbye.